Most trials are built on cold, hard facts, contracts, forensics, fingerprints. But today, the evidence that we're going to put on the stand is not on a spreadsheet. It's in the way a vocal cord shreds at the end of a 3-hour set. It's the way 40,000 strangers find exact same frequencies in the dark. Welcome. This is The Case For, and I'm your host, Matt Campobasso. Today, we're going to talk about something that is going to be both deeply personal and, according to my guest, objectively true. Today, we're going to make a case for my guest's choice for the best band of all time. Now, before we go any further, I should disclose something for the record immediately. If I were the judge and this were a real trial, I would recuse myself. Because the band that my guest will be talking about, Pearl Jam, is also one of my favorite bands. In fact, before we get into it, I want to give 2 quick exhibits that are personal to me, just so you know where I stand as we get started. My favorite Pearl Jam songs are Yellow, Ledbetter, and Black. But if you ask me in a year, I might name Better Man, or Nothing Man, or Elderly Woman Behind a Counter in a Small Town. And my favorite lyrics of all time, not just in rock, but in English, might be these. I know someday you'll have a beautiful life. I know you'll be a star in somebody else's sky. But why can't it be mine? To me, that's love and pain distilled into a few lines in a way I've never heard put to music. And when Eddie Vedder sings it near the end of Black, when he leans into that hurt, it's heart-shattering. But there's no other way to say it. But alas, today, I'm not the one making the case. My guest and close friend, Pat Noonan, will be. And in just a moment, when we come back, Pat will get on the mic, just like Eddie Vedder has been doing all these years, and make the case for Pearl Jam as the best band of all time. Welcome back. My guest today is Pat Noonan. Pat is a friend, he's a dad, he's a husband, he's a professional, he's a softball player, he's a decent fantasy football manager, and he's a lot of other things. Put simply, Pat is a good man and someone I admire and I'm lucky to call a friend. But today, Pat is here as a music fan. And Pat is here to say not just that Pearl Jam is his favorite band, but he's here to say that Pearl Jam is the best band of all time. And he's brought evidence. With that, I'd like to welcome Pat Noonan into the courtroom. Pat, are you ready to do this?
I'm ready to do this. Let's get right into it.
Wonderful. Well, good to have you. So tell us a little bit about who you are. We've known each other for many years. You coached one of my daughters in softball. But tell our listeners a little bit about yourself and what makes you you.
Yeah. So, we've been friends for probably coaching your daughter in softball. This first time I think we ever met. We're obviously on the same softball team, the Swingers. Great time every Thursday in the spring and fall. I'm a guy from Wisconsin growing up, moved here to Illinois, went to school in Minnesota, got a beautiful wife, awesome 12-year-old daughter, Piper. Just kind of your normal guy that lives in the Midwest.
You're a Midwestern guy through and through, in the best sense. Let's give our listeners your opening statement and take your time here. Make the case like you're talking to someone who knows Pearl Jam and who respects them, but still needs to be convinced that they're not just great, they're the best.
To start off, it's fitting that it's 2026 and this is their 35th year anniversary as a band, which is pretty outstanding accomplishment in itself right there. It's been rocking all these years. They're still rocking. They were on tour last year. But they put out 12 awesome studio albums. They've got multiple deep cut albums. Great lead singer, obviously, in Eddie Vedder. He does amazing solo projects. And when it comes to the band as a whole, the original guys are still there. You got the lead singer, Eddie Vedder. He's done so many solo projects. You got Mike McCready, awesome guitarist, probably one of the most underrated guitarists of all time. Just YouTube him and watch all his solo acts. It's unbelievable. Got Jeff Ament, who has a little bit of a heart in our family because my wife is originally from Montana and Jeff's a Montana guy. Stone Gossard, just a cool, calm, collected guitarist that just shreds without you really even knowing it. And those are really the big 4 guys that are the original guys from the beginning. Obviously, they've had Matt Cameron as their drummer for over 25 years. Unfortunately, just last year, he actually mentioned that he was going to leave the band. Fitting for a Pearl Jam band to have to be looking for a drummer. They've gone through multiple drummers throughout their career, so I don't see why they can't find somebody to step in soon. I've seen them 20 plus times. They get people to come together. You could feel it. People just love being in the stadium with them. They love their fans. They've just been around for so long. They don't always just make great music. They're consistent. Most bands, they stick around for years, and this one has as well. They're very consistent from their album 10 all the way to Dark Matter that they released in 2024, which I personally think is probably top 1 or 2 albums that they put out. So they're still creating amazing music. They're the last mainstream grunge band left from the 90s. Obviously, the other bands, they've lost their lead singers to deaths, unfortunately. But, Eddie made it through, and he's still rocking it. And I think music is what's kept them alive throughout all these years. They've just found their way out of the 90s and have been consistent throughout the decades. It's just amazing to watch. Good luck getting a concert ticket because they sell out within minutes. If you're not part of the 10 Club, it's really hard to get tickets.
Yeah, you hit the big things that I was expecting to hear from you. I appreciate you introducing the different band members by name. To your point, they've obviously cycled through some drummers. Matt Cameron, as you said, there for 25 years, stepped away late last year. But I think the heart of the band is there. You read Early Days and you think about who they were before Eddie joined, and you think about, Jeff and Stone and Mother Love Bone, and anybody who's interested in kind of how Pearl Jam came to be should absolutely check out. There's some great documentaries out there. Pat and I were just talking about one of them a few days ago. It's called 20. I think Cameron Crowe directed that.
Yeah, he did.
Shot it. It's fantastic. And to your point, you described them live, and I think the documentary does a pretty decent job of capturing what their energy is live. You mentioned the 10 Club. For those of you listening who don't know what the 10 Club is, that's their fan club. And obviously, like many bands, members of the 10 Club get early access to tickets. And so I never joined, which is probably why I've never had success getting tickets. I feel like you've laid out a lot of the reasons why they're your favorite. And some of those translate into best. I can absolutely see that there. And we're going to go through evidence later, some of the specifics. We've heard why they're your favorite. Tell us why they're the best.
It's their catalog that speaks for itself. They've got the 12 studio albums, thousands and thousands of concerts. And this really is the biggest reason why I think they're the greatest band. They've been doing concerts for 35 years. And first of all, every concert it feels different. Every concert is different. They never play the same set twice. They have enough songs to be able to do that. With them and their live concerts, they knew they were so good with it that they released like 100 plus bootlegs and 23 official live albums. When they're live, you really can't tell the difference between them live and a studio album. Every member of the band, they write, they create, and they put out absolute amazing music. How many bands can say that they've done that? Some of their best studio albums aren't even their main 12 albums. Take Lost Dogs, for example. This was an album that they released in 2003 that they had songs from all their previous records at that time that they just weren't able to put on any albums. With that came some songs like Footsteps or Get Me Out of Control and Down, and just unbelievable songs. They also have done countless solo projects, either by themselves or with other band members. Eddie Vedder does a lot of solo albums as well. He's got 2 of his own. Ukulele Songs is amazing. Everything he touches is great. On a personal note, I truly believe that Pearl Jam brought my wife and I together. We were online dating, and she came up in my profile probably because we had the same interest in music. And I met her back in 2009, and believe it or not, we were both going to the same concert that August 29th of 2009. And I ended up selling my pair tickets so that I could take her pair ticket. And we went together, and it was our first concert of 20 plus right there. And it was unbelievable. And I can remember a couple songs. They started with Long Road on that concert. And one of the songs that my wife really wanted to hear was Rats. And they ended up playing it, and she absolutely lost her mind. It was amazing. But yeah, I mean, going to these concerts with my wife, I've been to only one concert without her, and then the rest have all been with her. So I truly believe that brought us together. Our daughter's initials are PJN, so we went with Piper James and Pearl Jam.
Yeah, well, I think you've done a really nice job of weaving together Pat Noonan specific experiences and feelings and the ways that the band has touched your life with empirical evidence around their live catalog versus their studio albums. I actually was thinking when you were talking about the bootlegs they've released, they're definitely the only band consistently, if I go on Spotify to look for a song, if I type in a song name by Pearl Jam and there's a live version and a studio version, I default to the live version. We could sit here for 6 hours and talk about Pearl Jam.
Yeah.
You're not on the stage publicly for 35 years without having a lot of different threads that can be pulled on. And so there's going to be some things we don't touch on, but that would just be me again telling our listeners, check out that documentary, go on their Wikipedia page, listen to some of their music. I mean, there's the obvious ones. You've got Alive and Jeremy and those songs, but you sent me a list of some of your favorites to prepare for this episode. And there were a couple songs on there that I maybe heard once, but when I really stopped and looked at it through the lens of it's one of your favorites and knowing what this band means to you, I just thought to myself, this is incredible. Like, these guys just make good music. And to your point, the Lost Dogs album, which is just essentially Overflow.
Yeah.
Songs they were like, this isn't good enough to be on this album. They released a whole other album, and Lost Dogs is an incredible album. So when your leftovers are that good, you know you're doing something right. With that, we've got the stage set. You've made your opening statement. We're going to jump in next, Pat, and we're going to talk about some exhibits. And so I'm going to give you a couple prompts, and I would love to get your thoughts on how do you feel about that specific topics. The first exhibit I want to talk about is just pure musical and vocal talent. I don't think you can have a conversation about the best band of all time without at least acknowledging what brought them to the table in the first place. And that's just the quality of their ability to play music and vocal talents. If somebody says, hey, Pat, I hear you. Obviously, this is a deeply personal band for you, but musically, are they really the best? What do you point their attention to?
Oh, obviously, I'm not a lawyer, so I'll do my best to present this case. I think it really comes down to the songwriting. Pearl Jam 20. Go watch that documentary. They're writing music on a bus. They're writing music in a bathroom. They're throwing chords out that end up becoming some of the greatest songs like Daughter and Better Man, just tooling it and making it their own. Talking about Eddie and his songwriting and his ability to take the songs that Jeff or Stone write or Matt writes and just put them out there, make the feel. It's just incredible what he can do with his voice. A lot of people say they can't understand a lot of words that he's singing. Yeah, I mean, that's true. Take your time, read some lyrics, pull out that old CD and actually follow along, and you'll understand what I'm talking about. But some of the best song lyrics that you'll hear on an album, he can go from yelling and screaming to just like a calm, collective voice. He'll take a song like Blood, which we'll talk about later, and make it this raw and grisly kind of voice, and then he'll maybe have a song like Comeback, and it's like almost like a lullaby, and it means something. But I'd argue that from their first album 10 to Dark Matter, his voice has changed throughout all those years. I mean, you can tell if I put on just a random live concert, I'll know approximately what year this might have been out because of how his voice sounded in the beginning, and then he smoked a little bit, he got older, and his voice has changed, but he's been able to really keep that voice under control.
When I think about Eddie Vedder, to me, I think what drew me to Pearl Jam when I first heard 10 was his voice. To your point, there's just, and if people watch the documentary or have listened to interviews with Eddie, he had some challenges in his childhood. He had some trauma and some things like that. And you can hear that pain in his voice. And he clearly he's a masterful singer. You almost don't even need to know what the words are. Because you're just like, I don't know what this guy's saying right now, but I know that I have felt like this. And so whatever it is, it's authentic. That is, to me, music as an art form. If it's not authentic and it doesn't hit you in your chest, then it's not that effective. And nobody can say, whether you're a Pearl Jam fan or not, there's not 1 or 2 or 50 songs by them that if you sit down and you listen and you're in the right headspace, it's going to hit you right in the middle of the heart.
Absolutely. Not only with their original songs, but the amount of covers that Pearl Jam has played is unbelievable. When I started listening to Pearl Jam, it was probably around like 96 maybe or so. I was 15 or so. But Last Kiss, which was a cover that they put out, and I was like, oh, I know this is cool. And then I just kind of like, well, let me grab verses. And I think that was the first album I ever bought. And I'm like, oh, this is great. Now I want to find Better Man because that had Daughter, and I went and got Vitalogy, and then I went to 10, and then I just and then I went off after that. Going to these concerts, the people that go there, it's like family. I mean, I've run into people from different countries, different states, different regions. Nobody cares about your political background. Everyone is there to listen to God, in my opinion, Eddie Vedder. sing and absolutely bring the house down. It's like a drug when I'm there. You just get taken into a different world.
You're describing Pearl Jam, obviously, but I think anyone who's been to a concert with a band and you have that kind of collective experience. One band that I have seen a number of times, the Avett Brothers, and I know I've talked your ear off about them. When I've seen them, it's the same idea. It doesn't matter. You don't care who people are, who they voted for, what their beliefs are, where they live, their socioeconomic status. You're just there experiencing something that kind of transcends division. And I think that's music at its best. It unites people. And obviously, any band or any musician can unite people over a course of a song or over the course of a full album if they're really good. But then you talk about doing it across 3.5 decades, and that's another level altogether. So what I'm hearing from you is not just that they can play, it's that they can create, and that when they create, they're serving the emotion of the collective without becoming sloppy or indulgent. And you can just tell they're one of those bands it's not ego. They're just talented, and they care about each other. They've obviously had their politics. Some of the reading I did coming into this episode was about some of the fallouts that were had over the years and the fighting within the band. You have to be emotionally raw to make music. And so that's inevitable. But the fact that they've overcome that and withstood the test of time to continue to make music all these years later is great. And next, I want to move to Exhibit B. You've spoken a lot about your favorite albums, and I loved the moment you just shared. Kiss is one of the first songs by them I ever heard. And I think actually a friend of mine had 10. And I was exposed to the band right out of the gate with 10. And so the introduction that we've all had, depending on your age, could be different. But as you look back over 35 years, like you said, there's 12 studio albums, there's hundreds of live albums. But tell us what their catalog means to you and why you think their catalog separates them from other great bands.
They've got the 12 studio albums. They do get a little political, but I think in a way that kind of helps them. They create albums for the time. Riot Act is a good example of this. It was released in 2003, I believe, and it was kind of the heart of, 9/11 was a couple of years before, and George W. Bush was in office, and he liked to throw out his political views a little bit when it came to that cabinet at the time. So I think that takes you back to that time. I want to go back to Lost Dogs. It's not technically one of their studio albums, but I know it's one of your favorite songs, Yellow Ledbetter. It wasn't ever released on any of their studio albums, and that song was released eventually on Lost Dogs. Think about it. 10. That album, from the song Once to the song Release, and they didn't have any room for Yellow Ledbetter. That just tells you how great their music was for that album.
Gun to my head, pick my favorite Pearl Jam song. It's Yellow Ledbetter. And I know I'm not alone in that. They close most of their concerts with it. It's a fan favorite. I remember hearing it, and I think I heard it on a bootleg album that a friend of mine had. And I remember thinking, I have to have this song. I need to listen to it again and again and again. And I've probably heard it thousands of times. I've sang it in karaoke, but I remember finding it. It was the B-side to Daughter. And I remember thinking,
either
that was the first time it was released.
Yeah. Yep.
And I remember buying the Daughter single CD or whatever it was called back then, and the second song was Yellow Ledbetter. And I remember thinking, this is the B-side. Daughter is an objectively incredible song. It's got that emotional punch to it. There's obviously a lot of pain underneath it. And I just was like, move aside, Daughter. I want to listen to Yellow Ledbetter.
He changes the lyrics on every live show, just about. There's always some point of it where he does. But we actually have, I think we have a frame of the lyrics. But yeah, even when I read the lyrics, I'm like, that's what he's really saying.
Right.
Because sometimes that song, a lot of people, it's just like, I have no idea what he's saying. But it's crazy. I mean, you can go down a rabbit hole figuring out what that song is all about.
Yeah, I've heard everything from it's about a letter being delivered by the military to someone whose husband or son died at war and all these other things. But all I know is, like I said, at karaoke, there are some big, big notes, and it's such a fun song to sing when you're driving or sitting in traffic. To get back to your initial point before I took us on this detour, someone listened to it, the band heard it, and was like, you know what, this isn't good enough to fall on this album. And meanwhile, 35 years later, you've got tens or hundreds of thousands of Pearl Jam fans saying this is their best song. And it was, again, it was one of those leftovers that comprises Lost Dogs.
Even David Letterman, who introduced him in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame in 2017, he was like, this is my favorite song, and they couldn't even put it on an album. That's how good the rest of the songs were. So that's also a really good thing to watch, is their introduction in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. Getting back to like their catalog, and like people will say, well, what's your favorite album? I always favor no code a little bit, but like it does, I don't know. Like it depends on the time. It depends on your headspace. I could say today it's Backspacer. Maybe the next day it's Yield or the Verses or Riot Act or Gigaton. It's just what you're feeling. Maybe you want to get a little nostalgic and you remember some times back in the day that were good times and you want to put an album in and hear that music and it brings you back to that moment. Pearl Jam's gotten me through a lot of things personally as well. So it's a cornerstone of my life. Brings me back to those times. It's awesome.
It is awesome. And I've played a lot of their music for my kids who you know, and they each have a favorite Pearl Jam song. And I think that's a testament to it because there's a lot of other bands that I'll play for them and they're like, it's not for me, Dad. But, you know, they might come back and say, oh, I really love Yellow Ledbetter or I like Black. It's funny because a song will come on the radio and they'll like look at me and isn't this one of your favorite songs? And I think, oh, wow. And I'm not nearly the fan that you are, but it's something that to you and I, there's a sense of nostalgia and it's a soundtrack to a part of our lives. I think you've absolutely cleared the standard for their catalogs. Most of my favorite songs and my go-tos on my playlists on Spotify are the songs people would know from the radio. So tell anybody listening who is a radio song Pearl Jam fan, what are they missing when they don't go deep?
They're missing songs like Bugs, or they're missing songs like Footsteps, which I've already talked about, Comeback, Low Light. I mean, they're missing the real feel songs, the songs that maybe the band took a little bit more time to write. They don't sing them as much, so when they do, it's kind of special. In 2014, the year that my daughter was born, my wife and I went to 2 concerts that year, one in Moline, Illinois, where they ended up playing No Code from front to back, which I don't think has ever been done. I don't think they ever did an album. And then we went 2 days later to Milwaukee and they played Yield front to back. There were some songs that just never got released. And when I was in high school, we had a record store in town that they had some bootleg Pearl Jam albums behind the glass that I'd always go and like pay like $35 for a CD. And actually one of them I ended up getting was a live concert from Soldier Field in 95, and then there was an unplugged version of the Unplugged MTV that they did with 0 editing, so you hear all the background noise. Finding those deep cuts is where to go. Google Pearl Jam deep cuts and you'll find like so many different songs that you've never even knew that they had.
Clearly, there are hundreds of great Pearl Jam songs, and anybody who wants to do a deep dive is not going to be at a loss for content to find and enjoy. So let's jump next to something I've heard you mention multiple times here, and I think this is a inextricable part of any Pearl Jam fan's DNA, and that is their live shows, the way that they perform live, that energy. I would love for you to explain to the listeners and also to me, what makes it different and why do you think this is part of what distinguishes them as the best band ever?
I do think it's hard to describe the feeling to a non-Pearl Jam fan. People who have gone to their first Pearl Jam concert come out of those concerts and are like, that was the greatest experience of my life. It happens every concert. But why they're probably the greatest live band, I think it has to do with their experience, obviously. They've have thousands and thousands of shows. The biggest concert I ever went to actually was just recently in 2024. My wife and I decided after all these years, let's try to get pit tickets, and we did. We got pit tickets. So we were like 10 feet from Eddie. It was the greatest experience. If you really want to experience a Pearl Jam live, try to get pit seats or know somebody in the 10 Club that can get you pit seats, because I stood for 6+ hours and I didn't even feel sore after it. That's how much of a high I had at that. But you can feel them, you can see it. It's just amazing. Nothing else in the world really matters to me when I'm at a Pearl Jam live show. I could have something horrible happen the day before. I'm at a Pearl Jam concert, everything goes away, and I'm just in the moment. It just is amazing. Every show of the 20 I've gone to have been different. They've felt different. I'll touch on one fact. I know you were at this concert, but it was 2013. It was a rainy, thunderstormy night. And I think they played maybe like 6 or 7 songs. And then maybe around 9 o'clock, they had to leave the stage and everybody had to go under Wrigley Field, which that's another story, what I think about Wrigley Field. But everybody was kind of like crowded in there. It poured rain. My wife was pregnant with our daughter and we waited it out. And I think he came back on and he's like, I'll take the fine because, you know, I think they can only play till like 10 or 10:30. And I think they got back on maybe around that time. And they rocked out. I swear it was at least 1:32 in the morning that we were walking back and just were like on a high from it. It was amazing.
Yeah, I'll validate that the playing till 2 a.m., not because I was there, but because I was home following updates on Twitter. Yeah. I've mentioned it a few times. I don't know that, I think you said Wrigley. So yeah, it was I think it was August of
Yep.
2013. My daughter, Gemma, who you've coached, she was about a month from being born, and her mom and I were
Yep.
at the concert. And,
Yeah.
you know,
You got
I
a
had
little bit more of
said
excuse then.
I had said for my whole life, like, I got to see these guys live. And every time friends of mine would go see Pearl Jam, I had a conflict. I was in law school. It was the bar exam, whatever. And I just never had a chance to go. And so finally, I know you have feelings about Wrigley and the Cubs.
Yeah.
I have feelings as
Yeah.
well. Our feelings are opposite. I love the Cubs. I love Wrigley.
Yep.
And so I was like, this is it. This is perfect. I'm going to see him for the first time. I was so excited. And we got down there, went to dinner, got there, got into our seats. We were not on the field. We were probably 5 or 6 rows off the field. And I was like, this is the perfect angle. It was a beautiful night. And then Eddie comes out, the band comes out, they start playing. And like you said, I think it was like 6 or 7 songs. And I was just sitting there, and all of a sudden you could kind of feel the air getting heavier, like that humidity in the summer where a storm's about to break. And I'll never forget mid-song, Eddie's like, hey, they're telling us there's a storm coming through. We got to get off the stage. Everybody's got to go inside, like the concourse, and get underneath in the tunnels, which, to your point, even as a Cubs fan, I'll acknowledge, it wasn't built to hold all those people.
No.
And yeah, I mean, we vacated and we went down there, and the storm blew through, but I think it was like multiple fronts. And so a 30-minute delay turned into an hour, turned into 90 minutes, and we ended up leaving. Like I said, my daughter was born a month later, but we left. And, you know, I was just trying to be a good dad and a good husband, and just like, okay, you know, safety, and you're uncomfortable. And obviously if I would go back, I wouldn't change a thing. But I remember getting home and going on Twitter, and people were like, they came back out. It was 10:15. Eddie said, screw the fines, I'll pay them, we're going to rock, or whatever. And then I remember Ernie Banks got brought out, and
it was the
all
first
these
song
things. And I just
that.
was like watching it on Twitter thinking, of course, this is how and I remember thinking like, okay, I'll go back and see him next year. But when you've got young kids, sometimes it's hard to get out and go to concerts. And so, yeah, I've never seen a full concert. I've never heard them play Yellow Ledbetter live. Definitely will. And it's so funny that you were there with Christine, and
we didn't even know each other.
Gemma and Piper were both also there. In one form.
Also say one other thing about their live concerts. If you've never gone and you're going to your first concert, I'll guarantee you these 3 things. They will put on an amazing show. They will always play even flow. They will always play alive. And when they play alive, it's always towards the end, and the lights will always come on towards the end of that song, which is one of the greatest feelings and worst feelings, because it's just such a cool experience to see. But yet, you know, oh my gosh, they're only going to be playing like maybe 3 more songs. That's the other thing about their concerts. They always end their concerts with the lights on so that Eddie can see the fans. That's just something that someone should experience in it. So I don't know any other band that ends a concert with the lights on so that they can see everybody. It's just so cool. Ugh, I'm getting chills.
That is cool. I obviously didn't know that because I wasn't there for that part of the show, but
I don't know when they started it. It wasn't something they always did. So
okay,
they started it probably later in those.
When they play Alive, I would assume, and I'm sure it's not just unique to Alive, but I have to imagine a lot of people sing along.
That song was kind of a sad song for Eddie back in the day because he didn't know his biological dad. He grew up in a house with a man that he thought was his biological dad, and then found out later in life that he actually wasn't. That song's evolved now to like this like positive feeling song about how you're just alive and life is good.
I've heard that story as well. Actually, I think I saw Eddie talking about it, and he said, this is what prompted us to create it. It's become this anthem. And he said, in doing so, the fans and the people who listen and sing and interpret the song that way, they've actually helped me heal from some of that trauma. And what a beautiful concept and way to think about that. You know, he created this thing out of some deception and some pain.
Mm-hmm.
And he used it as a way to cope. And then the fans gave it another meaning. And he said, you know what? We're going to go with what you guys decided. And I just think that's a really cool story. And a testament to the kind of relationship I think that the band has with its fans.
Absolutely.
One of the things I think I'll say is, as you were talking about their shows, I was thinking about bands like Dave Matthews or Phish or the Grateful Dead. Those are some of the bands that people think are the greatest live band of all time. And I think one of the things that distinguishes Pearl Jam from them is you could put Pearl Jam's studio catalog up against any other band's studio catalog. And those bands may not travel well or perform live that well. And then you've got Grateful Dead and those other bands that are amazing live, but their studio catalog isn't at the same level of Pearl Jam. And so I think they do it on both sides. They're just as good in the studio as they are live. That's a hard tightrope to walk. So the last exhibit we have, Pat, before we move on to collections is, we've talked about him a lot. I think you referred to him a little bit ago as God. But Eddie Vedder, tell me why Eddie Vedder pushes Pearl Jam from great band territory into best band territory. And that's not to say that he's the only reason they're the best band, but I think anybody can agree that Pearl Jam without Eddie Vedder, we're probably not talking about them right now.
No, we'd probably be talking about Mother Love Bone, actually.
Probably.
If you think about it. But that's a whole other story. Watch
Yes.
the movie. But when it comes to Eddie, he just speaks to his fans in the best way possible. I think it's really something I can't describe. I think everything he touches becomes gold, whether he's doing a cover, whether he's creating new music, whether he's just doing spontaneous singing on stage. Everything he does is just amazing. He's a good human. He's raised two amazing girls. He's a girl dad, just like me, which is awesome. He loves writing music. He loves to sing. He loves performing. I actually just watched a clip today about how music really saved his life. I think he has talked in the past about how if he wasn't creating music, he probably wouldn't be here on this planet because he had nothing else really to live for other than music. As much as it hurts to lose somebody in Andy Wood, who was the lead singer of Mother Love Bone, that had these guys in Pearl Jam, they ended up finding this kid in California named Eddie Vedder, had a cassette tape of Oceans, and they're like, yeah, let's bring this guy in and see what he can do. And
I think one of the things about Eddie Vedder that you've touched on a few times here that comes through is a lot of musicians, there's this perception that they're divas or egomaniacs and things like that. But I think there's a level of gratitude. And I don't know that it's always been as poignant as it is right now in 2026. Maybe when they were younger and touring and finding success, I'm sure they've evolved over time, but you don't see any level of entitlement with the band, and definitely not Eddie. I think he's just grateful, and you can tell that he's just enjoying the ride. And to your point, if he has the belief that, hey, but for Pearl Jam and this music, I might be dead, what is there to be more grateful for than life? And so you just kind of get the sense that he feels privileged to be doing what he does. And I would imagine that's why, to your point earlier, he wants the lights up at the end of a concert. He wants to look out at the people that have changed his life. And what an incredible gift and unique experience for him to have. You and I could talk about it all day. We're never going to know what that feels like. I'll say this plainly. Eddie Vedder's vocal delivery, which is probably the first thing that most people knew about him in the 90s, is face melting. He doesn't just sing. He drags the emotion out of his chest and he hands it to anybody listening to their music. And there are not many artists that you can say that about.
I'd 100% agree on that.
Now that we've got the evidence in the record, I think you've built a really strong case. Any court case, one lawyer stands up, makes their argument. The other lawyer is going to object at some point. So we've got the evidence in the record. You've made your opening statement. What I'm going to do now is what any responsible host and pretend prosecutor has to do. I'm going to object. And so the first objection I have for you is this is a great love story between you and Pearl Jam. There's no doubt about it. I can understand what they mean to you, why they mean it to you. It's clearly very personal and it's meaningful. But I'd be naive not to raise my hand and say, hey, you know what, Pat? This sounds like you're arguing your heart. How do you respond to the objection that clearly Pearl Jam is your favorite, but you can't prove who the best band of all time is?
Longevity. The amount of members that are still in the band. You got Stone, McCready, Met, and Eddie, who are consistently there from the beginning. Obviously, they're always seeming to be looking for a drummer, but they did have Cameron for 25 plus years, which is something that a lot of bands can't say. Like even the Rolling Stones, even Led Zeppelin, even the Beatles broke apart. They're not a cookie cutter band. They came from grunge. They came from Seattle and they built themselves this empire and it's just unbelievable. I give credit to the fact that they're still doing it and that they still have all the members in their band for the most part. I also would just talk about how the band, and we've talked about it a little bit, their commitment to the fans. Always trying to bring live shows somehow every year. They're always trying to put out concerts. And if the band's not, Eddie is. I think Eddie has a show this year already on the books. So they're consistently putting out new shows. They're consistently working on new music. They're all writing their own lyrics. They're all writing their own songs. I think another reason why they've been able to stay together so long is the fact that they respect each other and they let each other work on other projects on the side. Jeff Ament's done countless projects with other bands. Actually, a really good band to check out. They did one album called Trey's Mountain. Great album, one-time thing, but they let the guys just do their thing, play with other people, and then they find, hey, I'm missing these guys. Let's come back. Let's make some new music, or let's go on tour and give the fans what they really want. But I think just that consistency and the quality of their albums. They're not just throwing out albums to make money. They're throwing out albums because they've got all this material that they want to give to the fans. Some of these bands will just throw out albums to make money, and you listen to it and you're like, I don't know what that was, but that didn't sound very good. Or they'll just put out albums too quickly and they're not really putting their feelings into it. So I think that's really the biggest argument, is just the consistency and the longevity.
We can set aside music just for a moment. Anyone who's successful, you look at a LeBron James, you think about Warren Buffett. These are people who are consistently performing at a high level over a long period of time. And you look at a Warren Buffett and say, oh, he's the greatest investor of all time. You look at a LeBron James, and obviously we're Chicago guys, so Michael Jordan's the GOAT, but people can say LeBron James is the greatest of all time. You have to love what you do. You have to have innate talent. I think both of those things are obvious for Pearl Jam and the members of the band. And I think one of the things that you've heard a million times, I remember VH1 Behind the Music in the 90s, every other band blew up because of ego. And to your point about these side projects, these guys step away, they go do something that scratches an itch for them creatively, and they're not betraying each other. It's not about ego. These guys are like, yeah, we love making music and we love each other and we're going to come back and we're going to do it. So the more we talk about this, I'll be honest, coming into this episode, I was thinking, all right, I know Pat loves Pearl Jam, but I don't know how I feel about Pearl Jam as the best band of all time. And again, people are going to listen and think, what does best mean? But there's a lot of data here, I think, that backs that up. So with that, I want to jump into my second objection. I think the ones that you're going to hear over and over are the Beatles, the Rolling Stones, U2, Led Zeppelin, Pink Floyd. Each of these bands, regardless of how you feel about your characterization of Pearl Jam as the best of all time, each of these bands changed music. They shaped culture. They built sounds and styles that echo today. The Beatles wrote the blueprint on what a band can do and be. The Rolling Stones have the swagger. U2 has filled stadiums with meaning. Led Zeppelin gave rock like thunder, and Pink Floyd, I think, turned albums into experiences. So I'm not naming these guys as straw men. These are giants, and I think you'd agree. You've already mentioned a few of them on the episode, but tell us, why Pearl Jam over those bands?
All right, well, I had to think about this for a little bit because, those are some absolute giants in the music industry. Other than U2 and maybe the Rolling Stones, is anyone really creating music of these bands? Not really. Obviously, U2 has an extensive catalog. I think they have like 15 or 16 studio albums, and the Stones, I think they went on tour maybe last year. I actually saw them a few years back. They were pretty good. It was great to see them, but it kind of goes back to that longevity. Led Zeppelin kind of had, they had an amazing, they're a fantastic band, don't get me wrong, but they're not producing now. They've lost members. Pink Floyd's lost members. The Beatles, obviously, there's only a couple left, and they kind of died out in the 70s for the most part. So they had a good run for a while. In my opinion, I'm not a huge Beatles fan, but that was music for a time that I was way behind. So, but I think Pearl Jam's, they created a lifestyle for people for the last 35 years, and they're still going strong. You can be a great band, but if you don't have the longevity, you really get put into a different category. And sometimes that's not always the fault of the band. Tragedy can happen. But when I'm talking about is a band that has stuck together since the 90s and are still putting out music, they're still playing together, they still love each other, hopefully, and they love their fans. But yeah, Rolling Stones would probably be the closest to that, but I would definitely put Pearl Jam at the top of this list. They've got the background, they've got the experience, they've got the music, the albums, and honestly, they're all very good human beings, which is kind of rare in this industry.
Sure. Let's go back to the longevity piece, talking about, again, Warren Buffett or LeBron James or even Michael Jordan or Tom Brady. When you start thinking about, who's the greatest at any one given thing, there are absolutely players or bands or even investors, if we're talking about Warren Buffett, that had a good year or a good decade. We might talk of them as a cautionary tale. To your point, some of those bands lost members to death, and there's things that you can't control. But what would have happened had the Beatles stayed together for 35 years? Would they have released 5 garbage albums? Like, did the band breaking up when it did serve the purpose of saying, yeah, well, we only got, however many 180 songs from the Beatles, but they're all great? Of course. Yeah. And to your point, Pearl Jam not only has done things great in the short term, but they've done it sustained over 3.5 decades, and they've navigated a lot of the things, you might call it with a basketball player, like a career-ending injury. Pearl Jam's avoided a lot of those things.
Yeah.
And yeah, they've lost members, but for the most part, they've kept that core intact, and that's really their soul. when you start thinking about the best or the greatest of all time, Tom Brady, the first thing people say when they talk about him being the greatest of all time is 7 Super Bowls that he won. People who say Michael Jordan, he won 6 championships. That's the headline, because doing something at a high level can make someone really good for a time. And that's why there's all-star games and Grammys for album of the year. But when you start thinking about halls of fame or the debate around who's the greatest, doing something at a high level for a sustained period of time is definitely a hallmark of the greatest. And to your point, they've done it in a way that's hit both sides of what you look at as musical, which is studio albums and lives. When I threw those names up there, I was like, I'm going to be interested to see how he walks through this landmine, but you've got me. You've convinced me.
I hope so. I believe if I were to rank them, it'd be Pearl Jam, Stones, Zeppelin, Floyd, and U2, and then the Beatles.
There's going to be some hate mail for that one.
That's fine. Bring it on.
I'll give your address in the podcast description notes. You made a good argument. It was a little bit ruthless, but I appreciate that. So next thing we're going to do is move to our closing argument. This is the last time people are going to hear you, and people are sitting there listening, thinking, should I go watch this documentary? Should I listen to these Pearl Jam songs? You want them to. Bring it home.
Go watch the movies. Go listen to 2 or 3 albums. In fact, if you want, just start with 10 and go all the way to Dark Matter, because that'll just tell you how great they are. They shaped the world in the 90s. They've created music that changed people's lives starting in the 90s. They've got this like cult-like following in a way, in a good way, because, people have met people at concerts. They've become couples at concerts. They've become husband and wife at concerts. They've got kids now that are going to concerts. Greatest thing I ever see is I go to a concert now and there's a dad with their 13-year-old daughter, and they're both just like, it's the greatest moment of their life. I do wish my daughter was a little bit more into Pearl Jam, that we could do that, but I'm pretty sure I can convince her to come to a concert or two.
She's young.
Yeah. But it's just the raw emotion that I feel listening to this band. When I first heard a song of theirs in 1995, I was probably about 14 years old. I'm like, I've heard a couple of their songs. Let me go back and listen to it. And little did I know that kid in Stevens Point, Wisconsin, was going to listen to this band. And, 20 years later, I meet somebody who has that same passion for the same band. And it was kind of like a fairy tale to even have it happen. I'll be a little sentimental here, but first time I ever met my wife, we went into the bar. I met her, and she's like, "So you really like Pearl Jam?" I was like, "Oh God, they're like my favorite band." We both at like the same time, like, "Yeah, I'm going in August," and like, well, we're going together at the end of that. So it's really a part of my life. If you need to just take a minute because you had a bad day, just pop in some Pearl Jam, listen to it, put it up high, blast it in your car, just enjoy it.
So, I've been listening to everything you said, and I've been trying to parse through it as you've gone on. And I think another point you just made about going to a concert and seeing a dad in his 40s and his 13-year-old daughter both equally engaged. There are not a lot of musical acts, bands, musicians where, usually if it's a parent and kids, the parent's taking the kids because they want to go see Taylor Swift or whoever, or the parents are lugging kids along to see Billy Joel, and the kids are like, okay, it's a concert, it's great. But to your point, like that level of passion, and I think that's a testament to their music. It's timeless. And yeah, there's the stuff from the 90s and you hear it and you're like, okay, I can see where this was grunge. But I also always felt like if you look at Stone Temple Pilots and those and other bands around there, like that was like grunge. Pearl Jam always seemed just like 1 degree off of that, right? It was inspired, but it was more mainstream, and not mainstream in a way where they're selling out, but mainstream in a way that like, I know people who listen to Nirvana and they're like, okay, I can see why this was a thing people enjoyed, but it's not for me. I don't really know anybody who's listened to Pearl Jam and said, not at least these guys are talented. Maybe they're not as deep into every song of every album in the catalog like you are, but they can respect them. And I think that's a testament again to their timelessness. So listen, that was passionate. Admittedly, I was leaning in your direction when we started, but you've made a hell of a case today on why Pearl Jam is the best band of all time. I'm sure we're going to get a lot of people who disagree, but you know what? Your logic is your logic, and I think it withstands the scrutiny. So normally on an episode, we talk about concepts, and then we'll break it down into like micro tools, things that people can do, take it out of the courtroom into the real world. All you're looking for here is people to either, revisit their love for Pearl Jam, or maybe spend a little bit more time with the band to get to know them in a way like you do. And so in the spirit of that, what I'd love you to do, give us your 5 favorite Pearl Jam songs. And I know that's probably an impossible task for someone like you because it can change. For each one, give us about a minute as to why it's currently on your list and why you think it's a perfect starting point for somebody who wants to learn to love Pearl Jam the way that you do. And I think all in, their songs are usually 3 or 4 minutes. That's 20 minutes of someone's life. Write these song names down. I'll put them in the podcast comments, listen to them. And if Pat knows his Pearl Jam the way that it sounds like he does, we're going to have some new Pearl Jam fans after they listen to this episode.
Yeah, let's hope. But yeah, it is almost an impossible task to give you 5. But I'm going to start with Footsteps. It was written by Eddie Vedder and Stone Gossard. Really, the reason I absolutely love this song, it brings me back to a time where I was towards the end of my college career and driving back and forth from Wisconsin to Minnesota in college and listening to this song on repeat and those cold nights. It just speaks to me in a way that's just really hard to describe. And Eddie's voice really comes out in that song as just kind of like a lullaby with just these raw and emotional feelings that are just awesome. Okay. So that would be one.
Footsteps. What album is Footsteps on?
It's on Lost Dogs.
Okay.
I think it's on the second album. There's 2 CDs. For the kids, there were CDs. You had to put them on 2 sometimes. It's on the second one, I think. Okay. But yeah, it's on Lost Dogs. All right, so then my second one would be Smile. That was written by Jeff Ament, the bassist. So Smile was a song that came off of No Code. That album is one of my favorites. But the reason that I really love it is it's just kind of a fun song in a way, the way that he's talking. It's also funny that Christine, my wife, she has a tattoo of 3 crooked hearts, which is one of the lyrics in that song. But it reminds me of my family, obviously, because of that. It talks about 3 crooked hearts. There's 3 members of my family, so that's why I really love it. I also really got into this song in college, my early years of college, and just blasted it throughout my dorm room. And I absolutely love listening to this song. So that'd be number 2. The third one that I would pick is Porch, but Porch in the sense a live version of Porch. This was written by Eddie. The reason I say it has to be live is because how it starts off strong and then it goes through a little solo with McCready, and then Eddie at this time will walk back and forth on the stage. He'll look in the crowd. He'll wave at people. He doesn't do this anymore, but he used to actually come off the stage and he would walk into the crowd and high five people, and then it would build up, it would build up, it would build up. And he'd come back into it, just hitting it hard. And the fans would be holding him up and he'd be going out. And usually that was the song that they would play right before maybe their first encore. So it's a live version. I will say when you listen to it live, you might not get that feeling because you're not actually there. But the live version is just unbelievable to see and hear. All right. And then my 4th song, I'd go with Low Light. That was written by Jeff Ament. This song is off of Yield. It's kind of one of those songs that maybe you wouldn't really know about unless you really dug in deep. But this song kind of brings me back to the late 90s when the album came out. It's really a touching song. I actually, in college, I had to do a project where you had to write about a song, and I picked this song and I wrote about it and I talked about the lyrics. I don't know every detail of that paper, but it was definitely something that I enjoyed doing. But that one just kind of, one of those songs just kind of hits a little differently when I listen to it. And then my 5th and final song is Blood, written by the entire band at the time. This is off of Verses. This song is just raw and it's kind of an FU kind of feel. And you can hear Eddie's raspy voice in this one. There's a really cool guitar sound. It's kind of like a funky, dark sound. There's a great video. I think it's in the Pearl Jam 20 documentary where they play this song and he beats the microphone stand into the stage to the point where there's a hole big enough for him to crawl into and he goes underneath. It just gets me going. And I would say if we had a walk-up song for softball, I would pick this one. So those are my 5. They change all the time. It took me a long time to figure out which 5 I should pick, but at the go ahead from my wife that these were good ones. So there we go.
Well, that's good. This has been vetted by 2 diehard Pearl Jam fans. So for anybody listening, just to recap quickly, Footsteps, Smile, Porch, Low Light, and Blood. Give those 5 songs a chance, and I guess Pat and Christine dare you not to love Pearl Jam once you've done that. Listen, Pat, this was awesome. And I say that as a host who should be neutral, but also for reasons I've stated, I should probably have recused myself because of conflict. But for anybody listening, I'll just say if you're slightly interested in Pearl Jam, start with those 5 and then try to go see them live with someone who loves them the way that Pat does. Pat, thanks for coming on, spending this time with me and making the case for Pearl Jam. Anything you want to say in closing?
This is great. This was a lot of fun to talk about my favorite band. I will say one thing. I am a diehard Pearl Jam fan. There are Pearl Jam fans that are 10 times more of a fan than I am. There's people that have gone to almost every concert. There's people that have been to hundreds and hundreds of concerts. I'm a small minority of this group, but one thing I'll say is if you go to a concert, you'll never run into somebody that you don't like, and get merch when you're there and stand in line for 6 hours like somebody that I know has done, and meet people and have an experience. They're just an incredible band.
Well, I appreciate it, Pat. Thanks for coming on. Thanks for making this passionate case. And to those of you listening, thank you for spending time with us. This has been The Case For with me, Matt Campobasso, and my guest, Pat Noonan. Remember, whatever your case is, don't be afraid to build it and carry it out into the real world. See you next time.